Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Anima Corner. Today we are talking about alchemy. It is November. We have made it almost all the way around this year, and it is now into alchemy. And so, alchemy is like the transmutation, right? It is taking metal and turning it into gold, is like the most simplest term. But Alona, why don't you tell us the actual word of alchemy is hard to trace, which kind of, I don't know, makes it even more magical to me.
Yeah, so I mean, we know that there was Latin origins of like alchemia or because it comes from Arabic alchemia and also Greek chemoia, which basically it has no certain origin, but people guess that it comes from a name for old Egypt. So apparently ancient Egyptians used to call Egypt not Egypt, but Chemia, which literally means the land of black earth. And so when it evolved, there was also the possibility that it came from Greek kymatos, which means that which is poured out, which makes sense. That which is poured out, because the process of alchemy is pouring things into each other and hoping that it creates something new. So there is like a tie to ancient Egypt, not modern Egypt, which also for me gives it that mystical, magical context, because ancient Egypt is where we get a lot of our occult, hidden, spiritual practices, but also then this pouring out makes sense from the idea that we were putting things together, like if we mix silver with blah 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 and we pour them out to each other, then poof, hopefully gold shows up.
And I love this. I mean, this is like alchemy to me is like the result of all the things that we've been doing, right? Like it's like as we work with manifestation, as we work with ownership, as we are like looking into possibilities, it's like these are all the parts that go into the alchemy, right? That go into the like, oh, we're going to put them into the cauldron and see what happens, right? And the idea is like you're gonna have to try, right? Like none of it's guaranteed, right? None of it is that space of like, oh, we just do it perfectly like this and then it works, right? It is this like, oh, we're gonna do it, and then it's like, and you're like, oh, that wasn't what I was trying to make. All right, let's try it again, right? Like this is that space of like in the lab, right? Like this idea of like, what do you have to put in, and sometimes you get something you weren't expecting, right? I think that that's the other side. Like, oh, well, listen, I'm going to add these things together and I'm going to get this. And you're like, that wasn't what I was trying to get, but this is also fucking cool. And like, I love that like transmutation of like, huh, I'm just going to keep working on it. I'm just going to keep the curiosity of it and the magic of it and like the maneuvering. So that's my love of alchemy.
It's interesting because I just came off of a coaching session, and it makes me feel like how coaching is very alchemical, because
Mm-hmm.
you have a client who's like, you, I want to work with you, and the coach is like, great, I bring these ingredients, and the client brings their own ingredients. And sometimes the client expects, well, because you had these ingredients, I expected these results. And it's like, no, I had my own results because these are my ingredients. When I mix them with your ingredients, they may not be the same, but that's not a bad thing. And it's also knowing like this idea that it unexpected, like, because also alchemy, it's like it's not a singular, it's like you cannot create alchemy within your own ingredient. Like you put salt
Right.
with salt and you still have salt. Like it's not until you put another element in that there's like a change or a shift that happens. And this client, this is our third session, and like every time we're in a session, they're like, this is not what I expected, but it's so much better. Oh my gosh, this is not what I thought it was going to be like, but this is amazing. And it's also because I don't come in with an expectation of like I didn't come into the coaching agreement or like, we're going to do this for you. We're going to guarantee 6 figures. I go, we're going to make sure that you're exactly who you want to be. And so like the alchemy of like trusting the process, like being in a container of like time and like shifting and pivoting to get like somewhere different is an alchemy. And I just like all of what you just said just reminded me of like being with someone else's alchemy. So it's not just like the things that I do to make my business grow or the things that I do to lose weight. It's like even just like a relationship that you create is alchemy. Like the time you give a project is alchemy.
Yes. Yes. And I think a lot of it is in that the space of the whole container, right? Like the space of like, oh, we're gonna add this, and like, is that different when we're doing it in open air or if we are heating it up, right? Is it different if we are doing it, like each factor always has some input, and that input, like, how much of it can you like control, but not in a control way, but like how much of it are you aware of, I guess, is like the what I'm thinking of. Like, you know, you're like, huh, I have no idea why this worked this one time that didn't work this other time, and like the temperature was different, or if the dust from the ceiling was what caused the actual reaction. Like, who the hell knows? But like those kinds of things where you're like, okay, like if I'm gonna try to make something happen twice, right? Like I do love the piece of alchemy where they're like, it's like, oh, we just did this and it turned into gold, and then they try to recreate it and like never does, right? And you're like, okay, why did it work once, right? And so like the magic of that, but also the experimentation. And I think that the experimentation is like possibility, right? It is that space of like, ooh, all right, can I look at it this in a curious way versus like must follow formula exactly, right? Like, which is why like a lot of coaching is weird, right? Like this that space of when people are like, all you got to do is make six figures of this thing. Like, you're like, yeah, yeah, okay, all right, thank you. Like, that's great. Like, sell all the things on Pinterest. Like, do this thing like this, and it's like, okay, like for some people, great, amazing, but like if you're not in it, like if you have no desire to actually learn how to do that thing and like hack the system and blah 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 blah, like you're never gonna do it because it's not you, right? It's like the elements you're adding are never going to make that happen, right? Like I will never make a ton of money writing. I fucking hate it. Like we know this, right? And zero joy, which means that is sending zero joy out into the universe. The universe is like, why would I ever deliver that back? And so then it's like, oh, okay, like if I chose, if I was like, hey, I want to write a book or whatever, I'd need a ghostwriter. Like we know this, right? I could speak it to somebody and then they could write it, but like I could never I would have to change the formula to get it back there.
Yeah, I actually looked up the etymology of experiment because it feels like a very core foundation of alchemy. And it's funny because it's actually one of the etymologies is like sorcery and spell. So like there's this old French esperment, which is practical knowledge, enchantment, magic spell. But it comes from Latin ex, which means out of, and peritus, which means experience or test. So like alchemy, so what was coming up for me is because alchemy requires experimentation, not expectation, right? I think a lot of people in the process of alchemy have expectations versus understanding that there's an experimental process, right? Like you can't work with a coach, and the other thing is like stuff is hidden, right? Like we don't know what how the ingredients are going to interact, right? Like if we don't know, so you can't expect to make gold if you're putting like salt and hydrogen peroxide together. Like we don't know what's going to happen. But sometimes you'll see these coaches, and I'm trying to bring it back to these practical experiences, right? Because sometimes you'll see these coaches like, and I got this client to like a 10-figure book deal. But what you don't know is that client that they worked with also has like billions of dollars in their bank account to promote it and create these things. And not that the coach didn't get them to the place to do the work and be visible, but like someone who maybe has a very limited budget is going to expect that combination to make that on their first try, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to work with this coach and I'm going to trust myself that maybe it's not the first try, but I'm going to be in the process of working towards that. And I may not have the materials now, but if that's the goal, I get to keep on experimenting until that happens, right? Because if the expectation is I'm going to work with this coach and that's what's going to happen, then you're setting yourself up for not really seeing the experimentation of who you get to be and where it gets to take you.
And I think it's like also in the opposite direction too, right? It's this idea of like it has to be an experiment, right? If you're like, oh, I can only go one step at a time this way up the ladder of whatever, right? If you're like, oh, the only way to get something is to be like, well, first I have to write the book and then I have to do this and I have to go through the press thing and whatever, right? And then like if you're like, I'm just gonna leave it out to the universe, like sometimes you manifest a book deal like alone, right? Like sometimes those things happen. And like in that experimentation of it, right? It's like doesn't mean that there isn't a ton of hard work around it, but it is this like idea of like, if I am allowing it in, if I am allowing the experiment, if I am allowing the like possibilities of what could happen, and even allowing the possibilities of not even having a clue what might happen, there is a ton of magic in it.
Oh yeah. Because I didn't even like my journey to book deals was totally like an experiment of trust, the alchemy of trust. Because I literally just said to my sister one day, yeah, my sister actually said, "You're gonna have a journal one day." I'm like, "Sure, I'll have a journal a day." And I didn't think about like the mechanics and what it was gonna be. I'm like, "Yeah, that's cool." And the alchemy was it didn't go through because I put a book proposal from the bat and I did the work. It's because my alchemy, and here's the thing, it's your ingredients. We have specific ingredients that creates alchemy, and my ingredients was my network. My network was like, hey, there's a project alone as a person for us. That was the alchemy that got me to those results, rather than being like, I would like a book deal, so I'm going to hire someone to make this happen, right? Like it's like very experimental old school, right? No, it didn't have to be that way. And I had no expectation, y'all. In the process of alchemy, expectation will ruin the results.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
It
Yes.
will keep you from seeing expectation will ruin the batter or the batch or the ingredient. It will spoil the work. Done. Like when you put expectation into the process of alchemy, you actually kill the process.
Agreed. And I think Jen said this explains a lot. And this is that space of like when you see your expectations coming, like what do you do with them? Right? Because like we're all human. And like it is that space of like, okay, expectations are gonna come, right? And it's like you can see where it like slows it down. I'm in the middle of reading Jada Pinkett Smith's book, and I know a lot of people don't like her, and it's fascinating to me because I'm like, she's telling this story, and it's like I'm pretty sure it was ghostwritten by the same person that ghost wrote Matthew McConaughey's Prince William and Will's book, because it has like the same cadence to it. I mean, the story itself is like very much hers, but like the cadence, and maybe it's the same coach that coaches all of them on how to read it. But it had, because I also listen to every book because I don't ever read anything because that takes a lot of energy. And so it's super interesting to, she's telling these stories, and you're like, you're like looking at the amount of time that is passing, right? Like she's a drug dealer in Baltimore while she's in high school. But she's like going to this special like school, like a special like performing arts school, and then gets accepted to North Carolina's like theater or whatever, this giant like other school. And like basically what happens is that her mama finds out that she's selling drugs. And her mom's like, hell no, because she was like, you can decide where you want to go to college or whatever. And then her mom finds out what the hell she's been doing and is like, hell no, you're going to North Carolina. Right. So she goes to North Carolina for a year, and she's like, this was amazing. But I'm either going to become an actor or a lawyer. Like, I just like, and if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go, like, I need to go to Hollywood. I'm not going to like stay in school for 4 years. And so then she goes to Hollywood, and she's telling all these stories in Hollywood. And you're like, it's like, you remember some of the things that she's talking about. And so, like, the amount of time in her mind, she's 19 years old, and this should happen like, she ends up on a different world, 20, like a year, right? And it's like, but if she had like the like, well, I'm gonna follow the plan, and I'm gonna like go to school for 4 years and become this kind of serious actor, and then I'm gonna get there, I'm gonna do these kinds of auditions. But like part of it is that every time she got in a room with somebody really big, she's in a room with Debbie Allen, and she's like, I love you. You are my entire inspiration. Like she doesn't hold back. She pours it all in. And in it, it's like, what kind of magic can come? There's things that she talks about that she said no to, and these like interesting things where you're like, what are my ingredients that are going to make this magic happen? And like, what does it, anybody that like comes from like here all the way to here, I'm always like, how the hell did you get there? Like, I want to know the actual formula. And most of the formula is fucking magic.
It's so funny that you said that because I have so many thoughts. A few years ago, I was at an event where we were representing what we used to be called Las Comadres. And there was this like bouquet of roses that was like being raffled off. And I'm like, I am going to win that. But it wasn't expectation, it was an inner knowing. Part of alchemy is also trusting yourself. There's like this fine line between expectation and inner knowing that it's going to happen, right? So there was this bouquet. There were actually two bouquets. One was like these roses that would last a year. So there was pink ones and there were red ones. And I looked at the team that I was with. I'm like, I am going to get the red roses. And that like was like the grand prize. And they're like, Alona, like maybe. I'm like, no, I'm not expecting it. Like these are mine. Like there was just like a safety, like a non-pressure, like expectation puts pressure. Like it adds the chemical reaction of pressure to the results. I had no pressure. I was like, y'all, I drove so they couldn't go anywhere without me. They wanted to leave. I'm like, these roses are mine. I can't leave without my roses. And I got the roses and I got the exact color I wanted too. And they were like, and so one of the girls were like, how did you do that? What's the formula? I'm like, there was no formula. There was no formula. I just knew. I did not put the expectation that like, if I get these, let me go get more tickets to make sure. Like, no, I knew there's an inner knowing. And I think part of the alchemy, the experimentation requires you to stay focused on your inner knowing and not deviate and put added elements or procedures that are not required. Like, you know, when you were talking about Jada meeting Debbie Allen, I was like, I bet you there was just like this excitement, this authentic energy that was just like, oh my God, I love you. Like, instead of being like, I need to, because I know before we started recording, I was saying how I used to make t-shirts for bands, and I would be with the band. And there would be people who were like, that person's there, I need to talk to them. And like, it made that person actually not like them because the energy that they were putting off was the expectation that you must like me, that you must be connected to me. And the people they ended to like the most of the people are like, dude, that's an awesome shirt. Where'd you get it? Like the casualness, the lack of expectation, the authenticity, when you put pressure, let's talk about pressure yes, it makes diamonds in a coal mine, but it actually can make things pop and blow up when they're not expected. So release pressure from the alchemy you're creating and the relationships that you're putting on people, because sometimes that pressure is felt when you're showing up like, oh my God, if I meet this person, then I will be famous and everyone will love me. It's not going to happen that way. That is going to happen when you show up in your most authentic way. And when you trust that regardless of what happens, it's going to work out.
Yes. And I think a lot of it is like all of it in its, like, if we're going to go back to the elements, it's like in its purest form, right? Like if you are in alignment, you are in your purest form, right? So it is that idea of like if you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to add this, whatever mixed metal and then add the thing that made it turn into gold last time. Now you don't know what that metal is, right? It's like, oh, it's just a bunch of different like iron and silver and different stuff all mixed together. And then you poured in the magic ingredient that worked last time, and now it's like blowing actually up, right? And I think a lot of times that is like what happens to humans, right? Like you are out of alignment, you are not in like your truest form, and then you like bring that to the situation, and then the situation is like just a little bit off, right? It's just not quite right. And so then it's like either A, it blows up, or B, it's just like slightly off kilter, or C, it's like, it's you're putting the pressure to like push it through or get it somewhere. And this idea of like, all right, if you're in alignment, like when you were in alignment for those roses, you were like, those are fucking mine. And it was fun. I think that the one thing that like when you're in that space of alignment, it is fun. It is that space of excitement versus expectation. It is that space of curiosity. It is that space of like openness. And then it's like the experiment can happen, right? Like then you're like, woo, magic, right? Like, I'm like, oh, that was exactly the card. So like this is the alchemist card, right? From the Threads of Fate deck. Um, and like I love how it's not actually touching, right? It's like holding the space in the middle, but it's not like the hands are not actually touching anything. They're like, they're not putting the pressure on, they're just like containing the energy, right? And it's like the idea of like working the magic. It's like the things that are coming towards you, you get to work with. But like if you grab them and hold them too tightly, like it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's expectation. That holding, like
Right.
I definitely think like alchemy is experimentation without expectation.
I
Expectation
like
kills
it.
things.
I like this formula of non-formulas.
I like to I have like a tendency to bring formulas to every word of the month, but this
You
one
do.
definitely like plays out. Like alchemy is experimentation without expectation, because when you have the expectation, you're actually you're going to divert your inner trust of the alchemy because you want to get there faster instead of getting there when you need to, because that's the other thing. Alchemy requires timing. I was talking to my client about social media and virality, right? Because there are people who are like, they want to go viral, but there's no purpose, right? Versus they want to be on social media because they want to put their message no matter who's listening. And when I got to Las Vegas last December, there was a new guy on TikTok who was just becoming well known, but it was like brand new. Like this guy, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but it's Keith Lee. And he was this young guy, and he would literally sit in his child seat. You could see like the cartoons when he would sit down and be like, hello, I went to this place today. I bought this much worth of food and let's try it. And he would rate, he's like, I like this, but it's too much salt. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. And he was just being like, it was like this weird food critic, but he was just like on his kid's chair being like, this was too much salt, not for me, but if you like cheese, this is for you, right? And in an instant, he was just doing this like every day. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he starts getting millions of views. He starts taking restaurants that haven't had clients in weeks to being lines out the door. And so not only did he create instant alchemy, so like even though he was doing it for fun and silly, and he didn't go, I have to be in the best light. What, the lighting was crap, the audio was crap. He's just like, I really like food, and I want to let everybody know the food that I like, right? And his authentic desire to share his passion for food created alchemy in his life because he became abundant, got brand deals with Chipotle. A year ago, he was nobody. And today he just disrupted the entire Atlanta food scene because he was there last week and basically was like, Atlanta's weird. And there are a lot of rules to all of these restaurants. And so he didn't get to go to the famous ones because I didn't know this, but Atlanta restaurants have these rules. He just disrupted there. He's shifted, he's created alchemy for people who weren't seen in the restaurant business to be seen, and people who were seen and didn't deserve it to be, but he's not doing it because he's like one of these, like, I'm gonna change things up. He's like, I just like food. And he's like, if you want to give me a table because I'm famous, I'm not gonna do that. And he would do that, right? Because he was authentic, he's successful, and he created this radical change in a year because he's like, I'm just a guy like food. And I didn't like, I'm just gonna step away. You don't want me to go there, I won't. And he's so authentic, and it's magical to watch him. He's in experimentation, he is enchanting.
And in that enchantment is that space of like if he changed, if he switched, if he whatever, it wouldn't work, right? Like, and we all know this feeling, right? We all know the feeling of flow. We all know the feeling of like when you've got it, like you've got it happening, and you're like, whoo, all right, I don't know what just happened, but it happened, right? It's like that is that like space of the magic, right? Like when I'm working with clients, when all of a sudden like the whole thing comes together and I can actually physically see the person like understand what the hell I'm telling them, and like as it clicks, and then my voice just gets faster and faster and faster, and at some point I'm probably talking so fast people don't understand, but that's okay. And then it's like if you were paying attention, you're like every other piece of it goes away, right? It's like those are the parts where you're like, you can't chase it, but all you can do is like create the space for it. right? It's like if you were chasing it, you're never going to find it again, right? But if you're like, whoo, okay, what do I have to do to create the magic? Oh, I gotta like bring in these kinds of people and do these kinds of things and like open up the space in a way that like that kind of stuff can happen, and then be surprised. Like then be okay with, ooh, okay, which way are we going to come around this? Oh, where is it going to go? Like, oh, what's it going to do? And like, seeing what the possibilities are. When we release expectations, we allow the universe to show us the infinite possibilities. Exactly. And I think that that is that, like, as you move from ownership, right? Like, if we're going to go back months, whatever, it's like ownership is this idea of like, I am responsible for it all, right? Like, I am taking responsibility, I guess is a better term for it, right? Like, this is what I desire, this is what I'm going after, this is like whatever, but it's like taking that ownership and not holding it too hard. It's like you don't want to like choke the baby, right? You don't want to like crush the kitten. Like, when you like little kids pick up like animals and they're like, oh, I love it so much. And you're like, no, that's how it dies, right? It's that same thing with so much stuff, right? When you see it in front of you and being like, oh, I'm gonna like create the magic around it without like crushing it.
Well, it reminds me of like, that's a science experiment where when you put something into a container with no oxygen, it dies, it shrivels.
Right.
Like, don't take the oxygen out of the experimentation process. That's a condition within the equation is don't take the oxygen out of it. Like
Yeah.
how many times, and I think this like literally, how many times are you working to create a radical shift in your life, but you don't speak into it, you don't give it oxygen, you don't give it life? How many times is the oxygen you give it actually taking it away? Like, this is never going to work, this is never going to happen, I don't know why I'm doing this. How many times are you literally suffocating, like, this got to work, right? Like, how, like, part of the equation is if alchemy is experimentation without expectation, it also has a variable of do not rob it of the oxygen it deserves to thrive.
Yes. Well, I mean, and like word of the year wise, right? Like one year my word was inspire, and one of the definitions of inspire is to breathe life into. And so the idea was like I just wanted to like breathe life into all these different pieces of my life, and I wanted to like be able to like, it wasn't like, oh, I don't want to preach, right? I just want to breathe life into it, and that simple like of it, to see what can happen and to see where it goes and to like see like, oh, if we breathe a little, we can put a little more oxygen in here and we like a little more curiosity there, like what can come out, what can come out of it, where is it heading, and which way does the universe want to point it? I think that's the other piece. It's like if you have that expectation, you're like, we're only going this way, and the universe is like, how about this way, and you're like, this way. It's like, all right, like I don't know. I'm open to possibilities. Like where can something go, right? Where can things, transmute to, right? Like this community itself started as Las Comadres. It was an in-person community in Miami. It was very small. It was run out of people's houses. That's how it started. It was 25 people deep. Very, very quickly, it was 50 people deep. That very quickly after that, it was 75 people deep. And it was like way out of control. It was like Gabby was like, Jesus fucking Christ, what the hell is happening? Right? Like the experiment went well, but it was like bubbling over into her entire lab, right? And then it was like, okay, let's contain some of this. Let's get some pieces together. Let's figure out what the magic is and keep that. But like we don't need like stuff like dripping onto the floors, right? And so it's like in evolution of literally anything, it's like, oh, well, where's it gonna go? When she
Mm-hmm.
told me she wanted to write a book and get married and do all the things, whatever, like we could have closed. I could buy her out, right? What does that look like? Oh, it looks like this. Oh, I could bring a loan up. Oh, what does that look like? Oh, what are all these pieces, right? That can like transmute the thing that you're doing into more, into what you want to take it to. Because like with each time, the oxygen could have been sucked out many, many times, right? And then it's like, all right, but there's magic. All right, where can we expand the magic? Where can we make things better? Where can we make things more interesting? Where can we like whew, like breathe some life into it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, when you were saying that, I'm like, all of us are in 4 different states. Everyone on
Yeah.
this who's watching and who's participating here is in 4 different places, literal. And when you trust, so experimentation without expectation, with what was the other variable? Giving it the right oxygen, but also then allowing co-creative trust, because whether it's a partner in the process or the universe, God source, whatever you want to call it, we're never really doing things alone. There's something bigger orchestrating, or other people, right? Like like if we want to grow this community, we're not just growing the community, the members are involved. You are
Right.
part of the alchemy, whether we know it or not, because we don't know who you're sharing it with. We don't know who you're telling. We don't know like what you're telling people about it that might create the alchemy of someone joining. And so there's always a trust in co-creation that is also involved in alchemy, right? Because you don't know when the ingredients put together is going to create the result. And sometimes you're not going to be the contributor of the key ingredient.
And I think what you said before is important. You're only one ingredient, right? You're like, I'm going to put me in. There's got to be something for it to react with, right? Like you cannot, like, creating in a box. Like if someone's like, hey, you have like to sit here with one pad of paper and just create something, you might be able to write a book. Maybe. Even that, you might like actually lose your mind and go crazy. But like if all you have is just like a sheet of paper and a pen, and you're like in a box, like we need the oxygen, we need the like experiences, we need the different pieces, we need the input from others, we need community, we need other ingredients to be able to bring together to like let happen, right? Because it's like every single time anyone here, because I know you all pretty well, like is stuck, you're stuck because you have decided to be like, myself included, right? When you're wrapped in your own head, right? When you're like, I don't know the answer to this. The answer is, let me ask some humans, right? The answer is like, who can I call? What's my lifeline? What do I need? But if you're like, I'm going to solve this in my own head, it takes a little longer.
I might also
Sometimes never get you there.
I might also add, once again, God source universe, whatever you want to call the higher power of your understanding, because I've had moments like I had a moment when my mom was processing my dad's grief many years ago, and I literally had like quit my job, moved to Florida, taking her to coaching, like, and she was like having a breakdown, and I had this moment where I remember like she was in the bathroom, and I remember looking at the sky and being like, Dad, God, angels, whatever is out there, I am tired. I can't do this anymore. I invited the ingredient of a higher power. In 24 hours, she's a brand new person. I'm like, thank you. That was really cool. I really appreciate the intervention.
I should have asked sooner.
I felt it. Right? Because once again, it's not you. Like, I was not going to be able to support my mom in her breakdown in that holy instant, even being a coach, even having the tools, even knowing, because I was too close. I am a byproduct of her ingredients. And so I needed something that was not source material to create a new result.
And I think with that, those are all, anytime you're looking outside of yourself, right? If you're like, all right, I'm going to start trusting, I'm going to go into the curiosity, I'm going to like go into the experimentation, right? If you're, because that's the space of like, here's the expectation. I have trained my whole life to be able to help the person closest to me through this situation. But she is not doing any of the things that I'm telling her to, nor is she doing any of the things I am expecting her to, right? And it's like sucking the oxygen out, right? as
Yeah.
you open up to God, right? As you open up to source, as you open up to your dad, as you open up to the angels, right? Whatever it is poof, bringing in the oxygen, bringing in other elements to be able to like mix with her. Maybe you're holding her too close, right? She couldn't even get the oxygen. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, get something. Please get something, right? And so it's like, all right, in that space of like, when we are stuck, like bringing in the alchemy to be able to be like, oh, all right, what kind of alchemy do I need? Do I need do I need more community? Do I need more source? Do I need more nature? Right? Like 90% of your problems can usually be solved by like a walk and some water, right? Like it's always the simplest answer. And we're gonna make it really difficult and some sleep, right? Like if those three don't work, all right, go back to some things. But it's like, oh, okay, if I can be like, all right, I'm gonna like in the curiosity of like maybe I'll meet someone outside, right? Maybe I just need to get a drink of water and I will have a different thought, right? Maybe the water is adding to the alchemy of it, right? It is that maneuvering it around and allowing the magic in.
All right. Part of me wants to look up Katie's. Oh yeah. I was like,
Okay.
Katie, do you not have the ego defined? You don't. Because she just said, I was just talking with a friend about the fine line between standing in my authentic power / sharing my gifts versus proving my worth and forcing it. Right. Like, and that's, this is why I love human design and astrology, because we have indicators of how we're messing up the formula, right? Like in a way, human design and astrology are the ingredients for bringing to the formula, to the alchemy. And so it's so funny that like, it's almost like I'm a chemistry teacher. Oh, of course your experimentation went wrong because you're using a center you don't have in the way you're not supposed to use it, right? You're supposed to be open to the possibilities rather than like, let me show them I'm worthy. There's no need to show your worthiness in the process of, because the proving your worthiness takes away the oxygen. It keeps you from being able to breathe life into the experimentation. Yeah. Standing barefoot in the earth if these first few don't work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Grounding is always so important, because the other example I was going to use, other than like saying God, source, use my Poppy, I can't do this anymore, is meditation. Sometimes like it's not, because meditation isn't about like trying to figure it out on your own. It's about regrounding and connecting to all of the universe in the quantum fields, because if you believe in that stuff, we're just an accumulation of mass in the connected quantum field that is not visible to the naked eye. And so there's a sense of reconnection that happens when you meditate or you ground, right? You're not just like, I'm solitary as an individual that is actually separate. You're never separate. Your mind creates a false reality of separateness in the world. So maybe connection is part of it, right? Whatever connection means to you, whether it's to earth, whether it's to the field, whether it's to a person. Sorry, I feel like I'm just channeling now, so I'm going to let you go.
But I think it is that, right? It is the idea of like taking yourself from the idea of being one element to all of the elements, right? It is that space of like, all right, like I gotta come back to like, and a lot of it is I gotta come back to like, I'm not that important. I'm not that special, right? Like I am part of a much greater thing. And in that space of like, all right, well, then I'm gonna figure it out, right? Like there is some resolve in that. Like what he was saying about like proving your like sharing versus proving your worth. For me, it is, am I trying to force it out? Like versus the like inspiring it in, right? And like I understand that they are both exhales, but there is some difference in the force versus the like breathing life into
Well,
it.
the force has pressure. The
Right.
force has pressure, rather than like the breathing is just the natural cycle. Like it is like the actual natural mechanics of your being versus like adding, exerting extra, like desperation, forcing. That's all pressure energy.
Right.
That's not natural. Like I think from an energetic, so, because I think, yes, there's all this like subconscious conditioning of like from pressure is where we get our diamonds. And like, bitch, I don't want to be a diamond. I want to be gold. I want to be gold. I want to flow with the liquids that make gold. I do not want to be crushed into a diamond. And so I think pressure in this patriarchal, late stage capitalistic world is what's in the way of a new level of alchemy.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think that it is that idea of like, if you are going to be on a slightly different path, right? It's like being able to see it and be like, that's pressure, that direction. Where do I feel more freedom? Where do I feel more like space? Right? Like nothing feels worse than that like containment, right? Being caged, that like put in the box, like that whole thing. It's like, all right, like paying attention to the shift in the freedom, right? And the language that you use around it.
Well, it also made
So,
me think about like there's a distinction between asking for guidance and being told what to do with the conditioning of the world too. Because once again, Katie's eyes, right? Because like there are moments where we're going to have to go to their chemistry teacher and be like, hey, chemistry teacher, I did all the pieces. Why isn't this working? Versus the teacher's pet who's standing next to you going, you're not supposed to be doing this way, it's supposed to be this way, because that person. So there's internal pressure of forcing it, and then there's this external pressure of someone trying to condition you to do it their way. And so pressure is definitely an impediment in the alchemy formula, whether it's internal or external. Do not let pressure keep you from authentically experimenting.
and when you feel the pressure coming, like being able to recognize it and remove yourself, whether it's coming from within or from externally, right? I think that that's like when you feel the pressure, like you know, like when some like when you're like a little kid and your like brother would be pushing and you move, right? Or like sibling pushing and you move over so then they would fall, right? Like anytime that kind of pressure is coming, like can you be a little bit into the trickster energy and like let it push for a second and then move out of the way to see what happens, right? Like in that space of it, instead of being like, oh, I have to push it back, it has to be hard. Like I have to push it back to get it off of me. Like, can you duck out under it? Can you maneuver yourself in a way that's a little more magical, right? A little bit of a trickster, a little bit of a magician, and like the like, I'll be over here, right? And see where like getting unstuck from the pressure versus like railing against it.
Yeah.
I like, I like. Alchemy's gonna be fun, y'all.
Every corporate job I've ever had, I always endure up in the principal's office because I rebelled against the pressure. I love the idea of flowing like gold. Yeah. Yeah, like pressure. And and the thing is that when, I think, I honor everyone who has a 9-to-5 job, because literally it's making the world go round for these companies to be able to sustain themselves, right? But all of these things that are happening, there are literally people who are telling their kids to go to school, to do well, to go to college, to get a job, because then they can retire. Like that is like a pattern, and that's not going to work for everybody. As a former college admission counselor, I saw lots of kids who did what their parents did. And then the moment they got the degree, they're like, and now I'm going to do what I want to do. And then they were happy. And the kids that weren't, I saw a girl go to college for computer science because her parents were convinced that's how she was going to make money. She flunked out because she like computer science and college were not for her. She applied for medical school and she's now a doctor and she's brilliant, right? Like this idea of like the pressure of the conditioning of the world, you're knowing your authentic self and resisting like external pressure is going to be important in your alchemy, Because if you're going to do things because you want it to look like someone else, then you are ready for a rude awakening of not living the life you want. You're going to look great on paper, but your soul is going to feel dead.
Yes. 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 And that space of it, of like finding the other people around you that are like, that think that your experiment is fun, right? Like, this is the biggest piece to me, is like every single human I surround myself with, every single one of them, I'm like, oh, where's the little bit of magic? Oh, where's the whatever? Like, even the ones that are like resistant to me, I'm like, all right, here we go, right? It's like just a little, it's only a challenge, right? And it's like, it is just this little bit of change, right? It is a little bit of, I only want people around me that are like, what the hell are you up to, right? What are you doing, in a way that's like, I know if I call them and be like, I need this ingredient, they're going to show up, right? I need the humans around me to have the other ingredients to be able to be like, have you tried this? In a way that's not like, you have to do it this way, but like, have you tried? How about this? What about this? Would you go this direction? Because in that questioning, it gives you like, huh, sometimes I don't like it, sometimes it annoys me, but that's good. So it's like how to take that you want, and take the things that you desire, and take the things and put them into something, and like, all right, let's see what happens. I think it's always an interesting space.
So what are you going to alchemize this month, Jamie?
What am I alchemizing this month? Um, I'm in the like total like alchemizing of what is next. I like finished out 29 or 29. I realized how much time I was spending like I was very deep in my body last year, right? Like trying to make said body work and do the thing that I wanted it to do. Right. I was deep in that space. And right now, and since I've like come off the mountain and, you know, healed a little bit and all the things, but it has been this idea of like, what is next? I was on this like random networking call the other day. We had this very normal call, and then this girl was like, so I'm getting totally not witchy at all, by the way. Totally fucking normal, whatever. I was like talking about Anima Collective in the
A
very
muggle.
business sense. I thought she was a muggle. She was not a muggle. Not a muggle. And so she's like, she's like, weird, but I'm getting this very intuitive hit to ask you, like, what is next? And I was like, I was speechless. And if y'all know, I'm never fucking speechless. I was like, I could not form words. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I know that there's some like really interesting things coming. It's like everything feels like it is this close. My word at the beginning of the year was both and it went terribly wrong. And so I changed my word halfway through the year, because I don't need more expansion, because I am so expansive that I was expanding into the things I didn't want. I was having a lot of the like, this is great and this is fucking terrible. And that was not what I was looking to attract. So I switched over to arrive. And I feel like by December, that arrival, like, I thought it was mostly about getting to the end of this event. And I thought that, whatever. It's always, whatever your word of the year is, it's always a little bit magical. But I have this feeling now that it's like coming into something a little more solid. I mean, there's business goals, there's whatever, there's the like expansion of the Anima Collective and all the things that I want to do. But the alchemy piece feels like it's going to be a little bit more spiritual. I just haven't quite figured it out yet. You?
I am I'm alchemizing. I don't know how to like tangibly say that. It's almost like I want to alchemize my energy and where I put my energy. I've decided that I'm going to spend this month meditating again. Like I used to meditate. So in my master's program that I completed was on health and wellness coaching, but the concentration is a fancy way of saying mindfulness. And I noticed that when I was meditating consistently daily, my energy was different. I showed up differently, even in challenging issues. Like I'll never forget my first semester of grad school with like 15 weeks of meditating every day and 2 weeks after my dad died. And everyone in my family was in a panic. And I was like, why am I okay? Why am I like, I know I'm sad, but I'm not freaking out. I'm not reacting. I'm not all over the place. I am so solid. And I feel like there's so much happening transition wise in my life, like moving, new place, like figuring out what my business. I feel like there's so much energy swirling around me and globally, locally and globally, that I'm like, I want to alchemize being in that energy again, where I am authentically, energetically where I want to be.
I like it. I think alchemy is going to be an interesting month. If you guys have what you want to be alchemizing, put it into the chat or put it onto Mighty Networks once you think about it a little more. We've got a lot happening this month, but not too much. We're taking off the week, I think, of Thanksgiving. Actually, no, we're still doing one of the things, but we've got our Wellness Wednesday this month is going to be really good. It is on parenting your parents. We are having an expert come on and talk about all the things that you need to do to help parent your parents into giving you, and probably also what all of us should be doing too, all the information if something were to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, like, all of the after caring, all of the, like, not just if somebody it like dies, but like if somebody got sick, how, like, she's awesome. She is the nicest human I have ever met, like randomly networking. She's the sweetest, super, super sweet. And then for our masterclass, I am doing and Alona doesn't even know this yet because I didn't even tell her yet, but we're doing a word of the month workshop. It is going to be word of the year. I'm sorry. The word of the year workshop is going to be on November 30th. This is open to the public. Choosing your word of the year is not, well, sometimes every so often it's a very super quick decision, but we really love this process in here of having a word of the year. And it is one of those things that feels very, very expansive. Everybody that does it, something always happens. Kim and Maya are going to come on and tell you that if you do trust, then you might get pregnant, because both of them had trust this year and got pregnant, and their grandmother's died, both of them. Weird. I think trust is off the list. Anyway, unless that's what you really want. But there is this space of, like, in the expansion of, like, deciding what you're doing, like calling it in and being very, very intentional on what you're calling in for the year. I love vision boarding, but like the word of the year, I mean, it really solidifies it. And if you hate it halfway through, you can always change it too, just so you know. And as always, I will be making bracelets for anybody that wants them. Selling to you at cost, very super simple, because I really like the holding it onto you at all times. So that is on November 30th. We have moon reports
like
as usual. Here.
I just took it off
earlier.
Because like I was writing to last night.
What was your word of the year?
Influence.
Influence. I'm trying to think if we have any other.
It's actually an astrological term for anyone who's questioning.
But it's good. This is why, like, coming up with the words is good, because you sometimes you get an idea of a word, right? And then you're like, you look up the actual meaning, you're like, or you look up the etymology of it, you're like, but then you come around to another word. And so we're gonna go through like the whole process. That is open to the public. So if you have any people that you think would like to join us for that, I will have the form supposedly today. Actually, I think Kim might have finished it, but I don't have it yet. So I will give you guys the link. Thank you guys for being here. Alchemy is going to be a super, super fun month. It's going to be exciting.